How's it going, kiddos? Some Jack Boy here, bringing you guys the first episode to a new series that I'm starting here on my channel for Borderlands 2, which may come to a surprise to probably most of you, considering that, most of my content here is Borderlands 1, and I have never really touched Borderlands 2 all that much. Yes, I did a few guides here and there, but all the series that I've started on Borderlands 2 never really got anywhere. So we'll see what happens with this one. I just wanted to test the waters a little bit, see if you guys want to see this sort of thing continue, and want to see more Borderlands 2 content, especially of this type of Borderlands 2 content where I cover, custom weapons and such, which is what I'm going to be covering here. So in this series, I'm going to be covering Aaron's version of the Dustwaste Arsenal, which is basically the Borderlands 2 version, or a Borderlands 2 take on the Borderlands 1 Dustwaste, which is basically a unofficial kind of weapon slash item expansion made by the Campin' Dutchman, which brings around about 200, I think, custom weapons slash items to the game for you to collect. Now, in this case, with Aaron's remake of said arsenal, these weapons, of course, replace old weapons that were already in the game, as currently there is no way to actually make new weapons in the game that are entirely separate from older weapons. The only way to actually make new weapons is to replace weapons. So, in this case, with the Artemis, which is, by the way, what I'm going to be covering in this first episode, it replaces the Lead Storm, which is a Vladof assault rifle. Now, first things first, though, before I get into the specifics of the weapon, I do want to mention a couple things really quick about the gameplay. The first thing of note is that I am using the community patch, which I'm sure a majority of you already know about. But if you don't know about it, it's basically what the name implies and is a unofficial patch for the game that, fixes and changes a lot of things for the better and overall just improves the game. Now, the second thing I wanted to point out is that I'm not going through here on OP8, but rather on OP0 or just with level 72 enemies. And the reason for that really just comes down to personal preference. I'm not really, a fan of OP8 and just the overpower levels in general. And I feel like showing these guns on OP8 is just shooting myself in the foot and doesn't really show their full potential, at least not in the way that I would like it to. And it's just overall hard to record footage on OP8. But anyways, without further ado, let's actually get into the guide. So let's talk about what the Artemis does. Now, the Artemis is a fire assault rifle that, when fired, shoots a bullet that will almost immediately split into a second bullet, which deals corrosive damage. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that being too close to the enemy will mean that the corrosive bullet doesn't spawn. You do need to keep just a little bit of distance between yourself and the enemy if you want to deal both fire and corrosive damage. Now, another unique thing that the Artemis has is the fact that when you ADS or aim down your sight and fire the weapon will continuously keep firing even if you let go of the trigger. Now, of course, you can stop this by simply unaiming, for the lack of a better term, or reloading, or just doing any sort of action that would stop you from shooting. And lastly, this thing has increased critical hit damage. Now, what do I think about the Borderlands 2 Artemis? Well, for starters, if we were to compare this to the Borderlands 1 Artemis, this thing is actually a very good recreation of it. Props to Aaron for pretty much nailing this one. The Artemis is one of my favorite weapons from the Dustwaste, and seeing it in all its glory here in Borderlands 2 is freaking awesome. But yeah, if you're curious to see the Borderlands 1 Artemis, I do have a video of it that I'll leave as a link in the description if you're curious to see just how identical both these things are. Now, one thing you'll notice with some of Aaron's remakes of these weapons is that not all of them will stay true to their original manufacturer, as there are certain limitations with Borderlands 2 and what you can actually do with these weapons, which includes manufacturers only making weapons for some of the weapon types and not all of them. That generally leads to issues, and in this particular case, we have a weapon that was originally Atlas, but since Atlas is no longer a thing in Borderlands 2, the only option then is to change the manufacturer of said weapon, and in this case, Vladof was the next best bet, and it still feels true to its Atlas counterpart. But yeah, all in all, I love this gun. The damage is pretty good, but just like the original, it doesn't feel too overpowered. That's one thing that I loved about the Artemis, is that it feels balanced. But other than that, though, guys, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments if you would like to see more of this sort of thing. But anyways, I'm out of here. Peace!